The pandemic hit, and it felt like there was a mad dash of people buying homes, resulting in people selling their homes for well over asking price. But not everyone buying and selling benefited equally, especially in the Black and BIPOC communities. So finance expert, investor, and best-selling author Lynnette Khalfani-Cox, also known as the Money Coach, is joining us, and she's giving us her go-to advice on how to advocate for fair appraisals and her housing market predictions to get you as much money as possible, because who doesn't love more money, right? This is Advocate Now. Welcome, Lynnette. It's so great to have you with us. You know, it's crazy but true to think that the homeownership gap is actually larger today than it was over 40 to 50 years ago. Why do you think that is?
Well, there's a number of reasons that really point to the Black-white health home ownership gap in this country. One is rising unaffordability. Two is gentrification. Three is, of course, the legacy of discrimination in housing. And I think a lot of times people think that, well, that was, in the 1960s or, even in the 1800s. But the fact is, the remnants of discriminatory housing policy absolutely do exist today, and it locks a lot of African Americans out of the dream of home ownership. Roughly speaking, about 45% of African Americans own their own homes versus about 75% of white Americans. But that's a bigger difference than we had in 1960, when housing discrimination was actually legal, because back then there was only a 27 percentage point gap between Black and white homeownership.
Yeah, and how would you say that that's shattering the Black communities and small Black business?
Well, when you think about it, home ownership is about 70% of the average American's wealth. And so an inability to become a homeowner, an inability to access mortgages and to be able to build wealth in that way has huge ramifications for the African American community. It's not just about being able to have a place where you put down roots and a roof over your head and being able to paint and do whatever you want to do in your own place, as opposed to what people can do as renters. It's really about all of the other things that home ownership entails in terms of lifting you up financially. It's a store of value, because typically home prices rise over time. It's a way to pass on a financial legacy to your children or to your grandchildren. It's a fallback and a safety net, because folks who have equity built up in their homes, and let's face it, the last 2.5 years, certainly we've seen a huge run up in home prices. Folks who have equity are able to tap into that equity and do stuff with it. They can tap into equity and pay for their kids, college education. They can use some of their home equity as a standby line of credit if they lose a job and if they don't have savings. They can use home equity as a funding source to be able to start or expand a business. So again, when you're locked out of home ownership, it affects your prospects in a whole host of ways.
Now, you say that we need structural and systemic changes, but what does that really mean? What needs to be done? What can be done?
Well, I think that if you look at the ways in which we need to attack the Black-white home ownership gap, we have to come at it from a whole bunch of perspectives. There's a lot of people, myself included, who are for reparations of various forms, because we know that historically, not only have African Americans been locked out of housing, but they've also had housing stripped and taken away from them unjustly. So whether it's doing things like special purpose credit programs that are specifically designed to advance Black home ownership, I think that's a good option. Or it's doing things like helping with down payment assistance, because we know that having that down payment is a huge barrier to home ownership. All of these should be solutions that we look at and think about very, very seriously.
Yeah, and you also say that knowing about appraising, evaluations, and comps are the keys to overcoming this drastic statistics in homeownership. How so?
There's been studies done that show that routinely Black homeowners and brown homeowners, Hispanic homeowners as well, have their properties undervalued. We've seen even in neighborhoods that are predominantly Black and brown, those properties are routinely undervalued. And again, that saps untold billions of dollars worth of wealth from these communities. And so that is another issue that needs to be addressed.
Explain how appealing lowball appraisals would help.
So, what you do essentially is go to your lender, whether that's a bank, a credit union, or another financial institution, and you show them comps, which are comparable sales. You can get comps or a CMA, a competitive market analysis, from any local realtor free of charge. And you just show them, like, here's the actual numbers. Like these homes, if you have a 3 bedroom, 2.5 bath, or a 4 bedroom, 3 bath home, and it's 2,500 square feet or so, you get comps to show, look, these other houses are the exact same size as mine. And then the appraiser is hard pressed to try to justify or rationalize why they would value your house so much lower than somebody else's property. And so you can do things like that. I know, of course, other African Americans who they don't put their names, I'm sorry, their race, they don't disclose their race on applications when they're applying for a mortgage. Some people have even used stand-ins where they have had a white friend, a neighbor, a colleague, a white family member, etc., to sort of pose as a homeowner. And when the appraiser comes, that white person is standing there again in a race neutral home without the pictures, etc. And then they get higher appraisals.
Why is creating a list of your upgrades a good idea?
Well, it's empirical evidence, it's data driven, and it's a way to show an appraiser, listen, I have these built-ins, I have, solar panels put on, I had new windows put in. We upgraded, we renovated our bathroom or our kitchen, we added square footage, we put in an additional bedroom. Some information that may not be, for example, on the MLS, the multiple listing service, or elsewhere. So it is important to give that information. We now hand that a list of upgrades and improvements anytime we're going to have an appraisal done on our property. We hand it to the appraiser, and we don't think twice about doing it, frankly, because we know that we have to be advocates for ourselves. So these issues affect, it's not obviously just the African American community or Black and brown communities. Again, it can affect women, immigrants, same-sex couples, etc. And we need to root out this kind of bias and make sure that it doesn't exist anymore, because it's definitely not fair and it harms people economically.
So, what are common myth busters about how much percent down you need to put on a house?
Well, historically, banks would love to see you put down a 20% down payment. And that showed them that you had a certain amount of financial wherewithal, right? But you absolutely do not need to put down 20% on a home in order to get into the house of your dreams, or any home, townhouse, condo, or anything else. You can have a conventional mortgage where you put down 5%, 10%, 15%, 20%, or even more if you happen to have saved up that amount. You can have a government insured FHA loan, and FHA is the Federal Housing Administration, where you can put down as little as 3.5%.
And of course, the question we all want to know at this point, are mortgage rates expected to go lower, stay the same, climb? I mean, how are we trending?
We've heard from the Fed. Some people don't want to believe what the Fed has said, but they've said we're going to keep raising interest rates in an attempt to battle inflation. And so we have interest rates for the 30-year fixed rate mortgage, which is the most common type of loan right now, topping 7% now.
Such incredible information to help close the racial disparity homeownership gap. Lynnette, thank you so much. And make sure you check out Lynnette's book, Zero Debt, The Ultimate Guide to Financial Freedom. Lynnette, thank you so much for your time today. I'm Sonia Baghdadi. Thanks for watching and advocating. For more stories and content like this, visit advocatechannel.com.